Hello, Tara here with Chapter 5 of The Bridge to Belle Island. Here we go. Benjamin lay atop a made bed in trousers and shirt sleeves. His coat hung over a nearby chair. He looked around the pleasant chamber with its faded but attractive carpet and bedclothes. The room smelled faintly of dried roses, dust, and old money. Whatever the heck old money is supposed to smell like. "Have you been ill lately?" the physician asked. "Only a trifling cold." "That would not explain the dizziness." "Look, I am laid low with vertigo now again, though not this bad in years." The physician nodded sagely. "Your ears seem congested. That could set it off." "Yes, and all that lurching about on the journey here worsened it." Benjamin wiped the handkerchief over his sweaty neck, hoping not to mar the pillows. "You don't travel often?" "No, I live near the office. I occasionally must take a hackney, but the cobbled streets of London are smooth as glass compared to the rutted roads that brought me here. The coach gave me a thorough shaking, I can tell you. One man was sick on the journey. A second almost followed his example." "Was the second one a lawyer?" Dr. Grant quipped. "Yes." "I'm sure the other passengers appreciated your restraint." The doctor snapped his medical case shut. "I confess I don't know a great deal about vertiginous conditions, though I briefly studied under an expert on melancholies and hysterias." Benjamin pressed his hands together. "As I said, it is nothing so serious. Simply vertigo." "Nothing simple about it." Dr. Grant drew himself up. "Well, I will consult my texts and see what I can discover to help you. Rest here today. Remain as still as possible, and I shall be back to see you in the morning." "Very kind of you, and of Miss Wilder, but I am not an invalid." "Doctor's orders." At the door, Theodore Grant turned back. "What brings you here, if I may ask?" "The death of Percival Norris. He was murdered." The physician's green eyes widened. "Murdered, you say? Good heavens! I would think that a matter for Bow Street." "An officer is investigating the death in London. I am here at the behest of our senior partner to inform the family and offer legal advice in Mr. Norris's stead." The doctor absorbed that, then said, "I thought Mr. Norris had retired from law, save for acting as trustee to the Wilder estate." "Well, now he has retired in every sense of the word." Dr. Grant joined Isabelle in her father's study, which she now used as an office for her burgeoning basket-making business. The family dog Hamish lay on a rug near the fire. "And how is Mr. Booker?" she asked. Teddy set down his case. "He says it is nothing serious, but I am not sure. I have ordered bed rest for the remainder of the day as a precaution." He looked her in the eye. "Isabelle, how well do you know this man?" "Not at all. I have only just met him." He tucked his chin in surprise. "Oh? I assumed you must be some acquainted with him." She shook her head. "No." "Mr. Booker mentioned your uncle's death. I am sorry. He said he came to deliver the news in person and offer legal advice. But I wonder—" "So do I. I almost think he suspects me of killing Percival. He mentioned our argument and the angry letter I sent." Her friend's thin face lengthened all the more, his mouth a long oval of shock. "What?" Isabelle shrugged, lifting a nonchalant hand. "But," he sputtered, "that is ridiculous." "I know it is. That is why I am not overly concerned." Dr. Grant shook his head, nostrils flared. "Had I known, I certainly would not have suggested he stay." "Yes, inconvenient, that." "I shall remove him to the inn at once." "No need. He is here now, and as you saw, he seems rather harmless." "At present, perhaps, but not for long." "And he's right. With Percival gone, there will be legal matters to sort out, especially with Rose about to marry, and we'll have his will and the trust to deal with. It's probably good he came here, as I have no plans to travel to London, as you well know. He murmured, I do indeed. Isabelle glanced at the mantel clock and nibbled her lip. I do hope Rose and Mr. Adair are all right. I thought they might be here by now. He stepped nearer. Don't go borrowing trouble. No doubt they are perfectly well and will arrive in time for dinner. I am sure you are right, but you know how I worry. I do know. He studied her face. How are you feeling, by the way? I am well. Bit of a headache. You drank a great deal of wine yesterday. You needn't remind me. I meant no censure. I know how difficult it has been for you, wanting to be in London for Rose, but unable to be. She made a face. You needn't remind me of that either. Sorry. He dipped his head, then looked up at her from beneath golden eyelashes. Just a headache? No upset stomach? Well, I am not ready to sit down to a plate of eels, but my sour stomach will pass more quickly than my regret. I hope I did not embarrass myself. Or you. No, of course not, he replied. But Isabelle was not convinced. In all honesty, I didn't think I drank that much. Perhaps the last batch was more potent than usual. You didn't help me finish off the bottle, did you? He shook his head. You know I don't drink. And my behavior last night no doubt affirmed your resolve. He laid a comforting hand on her sleeve. Don't be too hard on yourself, Isabelle. You are usually quite temperate. And will endeavor to remain so in future. His touch reminded her, and she rubbed the aching joint. I managed to hurt my elbow somehow. Probably just slept on it wrong. He looked from her arm to her face. May I? When she nodded, he gently pushed up her sleeve and studied her elbow. Just bruised, I think. Nothing serious. Good, though I don't recall hitting it on anything. His fingers lingered, gently stroking her skin. Perhaps out in the weaving shed? It's certainly possible. Dr. Grant, the most eligible bachelor in the village, was touching her bare arm. She ought to feel something, should she not? But when she looked at him, she still saw Teddy, the boy with ginger hair and freckles, and bony ankles showing beneath two short trousers and slipped-down socks. She smiled at the image, and he smiled back, his gaze glimmering with mischief. By the way, he said, I have a present for you in my cart. Oh, Isabelle replied, how intriguing. Shall we go and see it? Very well. She walked toward the door, calling to the sleeping dog. Come on, Hamish, let's go, boy. But the dog only thumped his tail and continued his nap. Teddy shook his head, lips wry. That old dog is on its last legs. I know, but he was father's. Barely more than a pup when he and Mamma... She let the words drift off, unspoken. No need to explain. Teddy knew. She followed him out to his cart, where he removed a lap rug from a wooden crate. What is this? She heard a whine through the slats and a scratching of claws. Sounds alive. It had better be. Jack Pearson promised me he was perfectly healthy when I bought him. He? Look for yourself. She opened the lid, and a brown and white head popped out, with floppy ears, bright eyes, and a lolling tongue, its sharp-nailed paws clawing at the top edge of the crate. Isabelle bent and stroked his head. Aw, he's adorable. Glad you think so. He's yours. A gift. She looked up at him in surprise. But I already have a dog. I know, but Hamish is more of a fixture than a companion. Barely moves off his rug most days. Maybe, but I was not planning to even consider another dog while he is still with us. I saw him at Pearson's and thought he'd be perfect for you. He is sweet, and so energetic. She rubbed the pup's ears, then asked, Are you sure there is nothing more you can do for Hamish? His expression soured. I am a physician, Isabelle, not a magician. I did try, you know. But if you insist on feeding him table scraps and not making him take exercise or the tonic I prescribed, I do try, but he doesn't like it. Well, then there is nothing more I can do for him. Please, Teddy. He sighed, and his expression softened. Oh, very well. I will take another look at him. But in the meanwhile, what will you name this creature? She stroked the pup's muzzle and was rewarded with several damp licks. That will take some thought. Benjamin reclined atop the bed per doctor's orders, but felt frustrated to be so unproductive. A manservant named Jacob came in and asked if he needed anything. No, thank you. Benjamin decided to gather some information from the young man. Have you been in service here long? About 4 years, sir. It's a good situation. Just out of curiosity, does Miss Wilder keep a carriage and coachman? No, sir. Not since I've been here. Then how does she travel? By stage? Jacob shook his head. She stays here. She has not left the island recently. No, sir. Well, I had better get back to work. The local servant could not leave the room fast enough. Clearly, Benjamin would not learn anything useful from him. Benjamin pulled out a favorite book he'd brought along and read to pass the time. Excuse me. Some time later, someone knocked on the door frame, and he looked over, expecting to see the young manservant again. Instead, Miss Wilder stood there, and beside her was a second woman, carrying a tray. We have brought you some dinner, Mr. Booker, if you are feeling up to it. He looked forward to the prospect of asking her questions more than consuming food, but straightened to a sitting position against the pillows. Thank you. Come in. A second woman entered first, setting the tray on the bedside table, while Miss Wilder hesitated just over the threshold. I hope you don't mind us coming to your room, but Jacob is busy out of doors at present. Not at all. Ben's frock coat still hung over the chair, but otherwise he was fully dressed. Miss Wilder gestured to her companion, who he assumed was a servant. This is Miss Carlotta Medina. She works for me, but is also my friend. He nodded to the woman, giving her a longer look. She had Mediterranean coloring, cream tea skin, dark eyes, and black hair pinned back. She was attractive, but her face held a world-weary look, and up close she appeared perhaps a few years older than Miss Wilder. Under the gazes of two females, Benjamin felt at a distinct disadvantage, suddenly wishing he were wearing his coat as well. Please forgive my shirt sleeves, ladies. That is all right, Miss Wilder said. I am not so easily shocked. I did have a brother, after all. Her friend added in a light Spanish accent, and I have seen men in far less, I assure you. Lottie! Isabelle exclaimed on a laugh, half indignant, half amused. I refer only to my years in the theatre, of course. Miss Wilder grinned at her. You forget Mr. Booker is not yet acquainted with your particular sense of humor. Turning back to him, she studied his face. How are you feeling? Better, though your doctor friend insists I lie still until he returns. She nodded. Dr. Grant gives excellent advice. You are wise to follow his instructions. The other woman gave a little snort at that, but when Benjamin glanced over, her expression gave nothing away. Miss Wilder said, You mentioned seeing my niece in town yesterday. Is that right? I did, yes. She and Mr. Adair were questioned by a Bow Street officer at the house, and she and her companion planned to spend the night with his family afterward. Mr. Adair thought she would be safer there than in the house where Mr. Norris was killed. Miss Wilder winced at the word. Understandable. She gripped the back of a chair near the door. And did you see Mr. Norris? Yes. Unbidden, the scene reappeared in his mind. He was found lying over his desk, pistol in hand. Miss Wilder sat down heavily on the chair, eyes wide. Was he shot? No. He apparently grabbed the pistol from his desk drawer, but it had not been fired. Then, how? As I said, we are awaiting the coroner's verdict. but apparently Mr. Norris was struck in the head with something. We don't know what. With a wine bottle, perhaps? He stared at her. Why on earth would you guess that? She blinked. I don't know. Never mind. He studied her face a moment longer, saw confusion and concern. There was no bottle in the room, he said, only an empty decanter. There was, however, a drinking glass smashed against the wall, as though it had been thrown in anger, or at someone in self-defense. I see. She swallowed and asked, And how did Rose seem when you saw her? Shocked and upset, I don't doubt. On the contrary, she seemed remarkably composed. I take it there was little love lost between her and Mr. Norris. Well, Who can blame her? Miss Medina hotly retorted. The man was odious. Why odious? Benjamin asked. Lottie, please, Isabelle interjected. He was a relation after all, though we did not see eye to eye. Isabelle glanced at the clock and fiddled with the chatelaine of keys at her waist. Speaking of family, I do hope Rose and Mr. Adair are all right. They planned to travel here for a visit. I thought they would have arrived by now. Benjamin nodded. As did I. They told the Bow Street officer they planned to leave today. Isabelle clasped her hands together. You are not helping allay my worries. He shrugged. Perhaps the officer returned with more questions for them. Perhaps he suspected they knew more about the death than they let on. If that is supposed to make me feel better, it does not. I was merely attempting to explain. I wonder if you have many friends, Mr. Booker. The ability to comfort is a virtue in a close companion. Well, thankfully you have Dr. Grant for that, he said evenly. True, and Lottie. Taking her cue, the other woman said, I am sure Rose is well, Mees. No doubt you are right. You know how I worry. Benjamin said, You mentioned a brother, Miss Wilder. Where is he? Gone, I'm afraid. Went to sea to find adventure as a young man and died instead. I'm sorry. Thank you. We lost him years ago, and the rest of my family rather all at once. Oh? I recall your London housekeeper mentioning Miss Lawrence's mother had passed on. Yes. Grace and I were inseparable, though she was 6 years older. But then she met Harry Lawrence, and that was that. Off she went with him to India, she who hated spiders and snakes and dirt. That's true love, I suppose. I wouldn't know, Benjamin murmured dryly, then added, Of course I knew your parents are deceased, hence Mr. Norris acting as trustee. Remind me, how long have they been gone? Over 10 years. Miss Wilder stepped to the window and looked out, probably hoping to see her niece arrive. I still remember it so clearly. We had just received a letter from Grace with the awful news that her husband had died of some foreign disease, and she was ill as well. She informed us she was sailing back to London with her young daughter and hoped we would come to the East India docks to meet the ship. Her letter only reached us the evening before the ship was due to arrive, and Mamma was wild with worry. Papa tried to convince her to get some sleep, promising to set out first thing in the morning. I wanted to go along, but Mamma insisted I stay home and stay safe. While she packed and paced, Papa ordered a groom to prepare the traveling chariot and shut himself up in the study to put their affairs in order. In the end, although it was after midnight, Mamma could wait no longer and demanded they leave. Papa gave in, wakened the coachman, and off they went. A disastrous decision, as it turned out. They collided with a speeding mail coach and were killed instantly. Benjamin grimaced. What a tragic loss. He could not imagine losing his parents and sibling all at once. Again, I am sorry. So am I. But I thank God the collision happened before they retrieved little Rose, or I should have lost her too. I learned later that Grace died during the voyage. Thankfully, they were traveling with an English governess Grace had employed for Rose. When no one came to meet the ship, competent Miss O'Toole found an inn and eventually procured passage on a stagecoach. By the time they reached the island, I was frantic with worry. for word had reached me about my parents' fate, but I had no idea what had become of my sister and her child. Isabelle turned and met his gaze straight on. So you see, Mr. Booker, my fears for Rose are not completely unfounded. I have lost everyone else in my family when they embarked on one journey or another. Her maid spoke up. But remember, Miss Rose was not born here on the island, so the so-called curse does not apply to her. Curse? Benjamin echoed in surprise. Miss Wilder waved a dismissive hand. Some of the locals have started saying our family must be cursed because any Wilder born on the island who leaves it dies young. Of course it is not logical, but you can see how such a thing might get started. First my brother dying, then my sister, then my parents. Yes, they left the island on occasion over the years without mishap, as has Rose, so I should not worry, I know, but I do. His hostess stepped to the door. Well, we shall leave you to enjoy your dinner in peace, Mr. Booker. Anything else you need, just ring the bell there. Thank you, I shall. As the woman started through the door, Benjamin called after them. What about Percival Norris? Isabelle Wilder turned back. What about him? He was part of the family too, was he not, as your uncle? Actually, he was only father's second cousin. We called him uncle out of respect for his age. Was he born on Belle Island? No. Why do you ask? Just wondering if the curse applied to him as well. And that is the end of chapter 5.